Welcome to the Parenting Literacy Show. Our purpose is to provide information that parents can use to raise children who are physically healthy, intelligent, happy, have good social skills, and are spiritual. My name is Dr. Joseph Lau. I'm a developmental psychologist who's been studying human development for more than 40 years. For the past 15 years, I've been studying parenting with a special focus on the best that parents can be. We are honored today to have Assemblywoman Nathalia Fernandez, who is serving the Bronx very ably and who's doing work in a number of different committees in the New York State Assembly that pertain to mental health and public health more generally. And so we find that she's somebody who has gotten a degree from Fordham University, and she's been serving in the Assembly since 2017. Before that, she was the Chief of Staff for Mark Jonah, who we all know and love. And since then, she was reelected in 2018 and is now running for reelection this November. She has, in addition to serving on a number of committees, she's directly been a sponsor of more than 45 bills in the Assembly, and she has been a co-sponsor of more than 200 bills. And so she's been very busy working on our behalf, and so we should be happy to have her. So I'd like to speak with her today about what she's done with regard to programs that might benefit parents. And so thank you for joining us today, Assemblywoman Fernandez.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Great. So let's start by just asking some broad questions about the New York State Senate and Assembly that a lot of people may not be familiar with. So first, what's the difference between the New York State Senate and the New York State Assembly?
Well, the New York State Legislature is, three branches, bicameral house. The Senate and the Assembly are just the two houses that a bill must pass through to get to the governor's desk. So unlike the city council, where we have one body of members, Republican or Democrats, we have two bodies that need to get a bill passed. So the Assembly is the lower level in chamber. There are more members. Our districts are smaller. Throughout the state, there's 150 assembly districts, so 150 members. About 102 of those members are Democrats, and the rest are Republicans. And in the state Senate, there are about 63 districts, I believe. And I couldn't tell you the exact number right now, but I know that we finally have the majority of Democrats in the state Senate. Okay. And we may have more this year, who knows?
Great. Now, I know that you do a lot of work, and you do a lot of work on behalf of all the constituents of New York State, and in particular, representing the Bronx. You're doing the best you can to help us. Why should parents pay attention to the kind of work that you're doing? Why is it important to us?
Well, it's extremely important because many of the laws that we pass, do affect policies and regulations in various, if not all areas, in our daily lives. So for parents, understanding, what a parent's duties and responsibilities are, raising your children and making sure you can work and provide for your children. There are laws that we have passed and are looking to pass that would help the parent, be able to get by and honestly, keep a living wage and really try to aid them in raising their children and working and, making sure you're in a safe work environment that is accommodable to your lifestyle, your parenting lifestyle, because these are things that we've had to, make sure in the form of legislation that our rights are protected. So like one of the things that I think we touched in the questions before, we started recording, was new mothers and the need to find or to be protected in making sure that you can breastfeed at work. Before there was not regulations and nothing in the books, but employers were able to say, no, you can't do this here. We don't allow this here. Or if you're going to do that, then go home. Now we have laws that protect women and, protect employees against employers that try to fire them because, the lifestyle or the needs are interrupting their work, that try to, diminish their pay. These are protections that we have placed to protect mothers and parents, needing to do these things to take care of their children, like breastfeed, or for a father taking paternity leave. Before that was something that I know still, and, I have constituents that are still struggling to earn the right and, be free of harassment from employer or other employees for taking the needed paternity leave. Because, who are we to say that as a father you shouldn't be home taking care of your child? These are things that we've had to clear up and make sure that parents are not being at risk of losing their job or, harassed in their job.
Yeah, that makes sense. I definitely want to talk more about paternity leave since I ran into an issue with that some years ago. But let me talk a little bit more about the issue of parents, pumping milk or breastfeeding in their jobs. Did you actually have, or do we actually say have employers who would try to either fire parents for that, or would you say pay?
I'm sure, yes, there's been cases, usually when a bill is presented and introduced, there's always a backstory and, a foundation of a reason why this bill is important. So I am sure that there's plenty of cases prior that, an employer would have let off, their employee because they didn't want them to, to breastfeed at work, or maybe, they had too many children or something like that. And I know even recently there's been, friends and past constituents that I've spoken with in the past that, have had issues in the workplace that, there was no space really sanitary or private or safe for an employee to go breast milk. I mean, to go breastfeed. So, in the state capitol, honestly, that's like the one place that you can see all of the new laws taken into effect. So every public bathroom in the state capitol has an area, and even like pods, you see it in the concourse. They are private little rooms. They pop up, but little rooms that a woman has the privacy and time and space to breastfeed, if needed, or to pump milk.
Mhm.
Um, Even more so with amenities.
How does it come to your attention that there's a need for legislation about something regarding parenting or anything else?
Um, Usually by my constituents, like I have parents coming in sometimes like, this is my story and this is what's happening and I did everything, but now I'm getting this consequence, or this, is happening to me because the law as it is says this, and because it says this, it can be interpreted into something else based on the language, because the language is so important when you're writing legislation. Literally one word can change the
Yes.
entire action and intention of a piece of legislation. So sometimes it's as simple as just changing a word or two in a current law, because those two words have allowed, judges or whoever to interpret it to be something else. And that, interpretation, that loophole harms people. So a lot of the time it's right from my constituents, own experience and proof that, this law as it is and this, regulation as it is actually harmful in this way. And
Yeah,
most of the time that turns into, a fix, an amendment.
I've seen legislation at the United Nations where they would argue for 3 months about where to put a comma. It's
Hmm.
amazing, but like you say, it does matter.
Yeah, it really,
Uh,
really is important.
I know that you were involved in a bill regarding the bail of pregnant women. Can you describe that?
Yes, I introduced that bill. It was one of my first bills coming into the assembly. And at the time, the cash bail bill that has been passed was in existence, but it was a very controversial bill that for at least 10 years it was always like, pushed aside. No, we got to talk on it more. Or, you know, even if the bill was the language and everything it intended to be, um, the leadership knew that there wasn't enough votes to pass it. So that's another thing that, would hold up a bill from moving is, within conference talking and literally counting, votes. Do we know this is going to pass? Do we have the support here? So, there's even sometimes pre-conversations, to members. How do you feel about this bill? Would you pass it? So once we have a consensus understanding, okay, this bill has a really good chance of passing, let's bring it to the floor and allow debate, you know?
Interesting. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. So for my bill, cash bail has been in existence. The bill has been introduced, but at the time, before we had the majority, it was still not confident that the bill would get a chance to come to the floor to have its debate and, really then get the votes. So my bill kind of now falls into what the bill is now. And basically, a woman gets arrested, whether she committed the crime or not the crime, because that was the point of cash bail, that people that were not convicted of being guilty were still doing jail time before the actual conviction.
Yeah.
So my intention was, in safety of the woman and of the fetus and the baby, to not have to go to a jail cell and be held at Rikers Island, until while you wait for your court date. So I believe the details of my bill said if you are past like 2 months pregnancy, um, you would not have to post bail. You would wait at home, get your court date, and then go to court to, see if you will get convicted or whatever, the outcome may be.
Was
So
this passed?
no, it never passed because we ended up kind of not needing my bill and going straight to the cash bail bill.
I see.
So now in general, anybody that is arrested for an alleged crime, depending on the crime, because we did make a list, and whether if it's severe crimes, then yes, like if it's murder or something, then they will hold you until the murder trial. But if it's an accusation like Khalif Browder, that's the best example that we have. He was accused of taking a backpack. Nobody had proof, but we had to go to trial to go through the process, and his trial date took 3 years to get to.
Wow.
But he didn't have the means to pay the $5,000 bail.
Wow.
So he had to wait in jail for 3 years in Rikers Island, going through all the trauma and struggles that an inmate can tell you, that happens on Rikers. And he knew he was innocent, and in numerous times they were like, just plead guilty, you'll have it on your record, but you'll be out. And that's the struggle that many people are faced, before the cash bail was passed, that they're taking guilty deals and now having this guilty record on probation, knowing that they never committed the crime.
Yeah.
So Khalif Browder, is the example that we hold as to why this was so important, because families that knew, and individuals that knew they were innocent and needed their court date to prove it, the court system so backed up, sitting in jail for 3 years, until finally, when he had a court date, it didn't even have to go to trial. The judge just dismissed it right away, knowing that they didn't have the evidence to back anything up.
Wow. That's
So had cash bail been passed, Khalif would have been able to go home. Again, he was a minor. He was only 16 years old. He would have been able to go home and, just go to his court dates when needed, instead of sitting in jail for 3 years like a criminal that he was not.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's something. Now, I understand that a few years ago, New York State introduced what they call, I guess, parent coordinators in the public schools. And if I understand correctly, these are people who are trained in academia or academics who are there to help parents help their children do well in school. Are you familiar with that program? Could you maybe tell us a little bit about it?
Yes, and I think parent coordinators are an amazing addition to our school systems, because looking at New York City, at least, excuse me, we're such a diverse city, mixed of residents, green card holders, citizens, undocumented, everybody. But the one thing that, we know that is right and needed is providing a good education for our children. And the parent coordinators have been able to be very helpful to immigrant parents, that might have language barriers and can't understand, or help their child with the schoolwork, or maybe single parents that are working 5 jobs, and are unable to be home to help their child with the schoolwork. Yes, they've been extremely helpful to all types of parents, whether the parent is undocumented, a single parent, or even, a new parent, a young parent. And it's been such an assistance and, really a blessing for the student, because the student is getting the best attention, the most attention should they need it. And, also just keeps the parent up to date and aware of what's going on with their student.
Yeah, that makes sense. Sounds like a great program. Now, are they still active even today with the classes being closed in many schools?
Yes, we've been in a number of webinars and updates and meetings, making sure that parents and students are getting more support than before, because this is such, new territory, uncharted territory that we've never experienced prior. COVID came, remote learning came, and automatically, they're like, okay, everything's gonna be online, but not every household has a computer or internet. Or smartphone, or that's the only thing they have, a smartphone, and they have numerous kids in the house. So it was certainly an adjustment process, and still is. There's still some parents that are waiting for, the laptops, and the school had to make sure they bought and provided enough.
The schools are providing those?
Yes, New York City schools are providing a tablet, should the family need it.
Wonderful. Okay.
Yes. So parent coordinators have been, really the backbone of making sure that parents have what they need, that the children have what they need, and also a support system too. This has been a very traumatic experience, COVID and learning and
Yeah.
transitioning from school to remote, and some parents not working from home. And I'm on the mental health committee in the state assembly, so I really try to make sure that we're aware of these issues and the effects of what's happening now. And even though this is not a war, not a battle, there are going to be many people, families, seniors, individuals that are going to have a form of post-traumatic stress syndrome after this. So with the anxiety that has grown in many people, the paranoia, the fear of what is in the future, and the stress of just trying to get by every day. Because understand too, many families that have never gone to a food pantry or have ever had to stand in line at a food pantry, now that's what they have to do. That's a survival method now. So there's a lot that is going on with our mental health right now, and the parent coordinators, just being a person they can call, or like someone that checks in on them, like, how you doing, is your child okay? It really means the world to many.
I'm glad you brought up the issue of mental health, because I want to ask you about that. It seems that with all the stressors that are going on right now, as you said, between the virus, between people losing their jobs, yeah, and the opioid crisis hasn't left us. That's still in the background that people have kind of forgot about. And yet the children not going to school because they've got to stay home because of the virus. It just seems like the level of stress should be increasing in our society, and maybe more in New York, we're so crowded. And so it raises a few questions. One is, have you seen evidence of that kind of rise in stress in the household? And what are you doing at the government level to help us, to help parents?
Absolutely. Sadly, and this, was discovered early on in the pandemic when we were in like a serious lockdown. Domestic violence issues, the calls were coming in less, I heard, but the the act and the unfortunate violence was still happening, if not growing. And that's because again, imagining a family unit is now quarantined at home, being in that same space with people that you're not with all day every day and now forced to be. Yeah, it could create some tension. Some spouses and couples, with maybe already a history of domestic violence, now you're stuck with your attacker. And it could, things have certainly gotten worse in some cases, and the state recognized that during the quarantine period early on this year. The governor, by honestly with members letting the governor know, because we had daily phone calls, assembly member senators to the governor's team, of things that we're seeing, discovering, being told, going through with our constituencies. The governor created a New York State domestic violence hotline. Our precincts have been in communication, trying to build up more and creating more support within their domestic violence units, and also as members and everybody pushing our current organizations. And I know the governor did create a hotline as well for mental wellness needs. I remember that he had put a notice out, any retired doctor, psychologist, therapist, or currently working, if you like to volunteer your time to be a responder to one of these calls, let us know. And within like 3 days, the state had 10,000 volunteers,
Wow, that's
that were
wonderful.
ready to just be on the other end of the phone for anybody that, just needed to talk to someone or ask a question or share a concern. So we certainly
Great.
have, came together for the need. And I want to say it's maybe been okay because we've been able to come outside, leave our houses safely, knowing the precautions to take with the mask and hand sanitizer. But it certainly still is, an issue that has never left and never disappeared. It was always here, but COVID did exacerbate it a little bit.
Wow, that makes sense. Uh, we started to talk about the paternity leave. I want to come back to that. That's something where I have personal experience. I remember in 1988 when my son's mother was pregnant with him. I went to my employer in New York City and said, I'd like to take paternity leave. and they just laughed so hard. I was so embarrassed. It's like, a man taking paternity leave,
Well,
it's like, it was
shame on
unheard of.
them.
Huh?
I said, shame on them.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, that was, some time ago, so like, 30 years ago. So it was before the current times of, more political correctness. But it's sort of unheard of for fathers to take paternity leave, because we're not the ones who are supposed to be the nurturers. We're not sort of, the ones whose society acknowledges to do that. And yet the reality is that, more and more fathers are concerned about their children and generally want to help. So I understand that we have in New York State now this state paid family leave program. Um, could you maybe talk a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. You didn't mention it in my previous, but I worked for Governor Cuomo before I ran for office. I was his Bronx representative, and in that year, it was 2017 that he introduced finally the implementation of paid family leave. It was a piece of legislation that had been worked on for the few years prior, and finally paid family leave, was passed and started. And the idea of it is that families sometimes need to take time to take care of their families for various reasons, not just maternity leave and paternity leave, but also say a new a family couple, spouses have an adopted child. You didn't carry the baby, but this is time that you need now to connect and establish your new family unit.
Mhm.
um you there Within the requirements, aside from the reasons that I just said, also you're allowed paid family leave. Say a family member just came back from being deployed overseas, and that is a process that one does go through after coming back from, whether you were in war or just being stationed out there. You have now the safety of keeping your job, not being demoted or moved in your job, but still with the ability and freedom to take the time for your family. And I think within a year, you could take up to 3 months of paid family leave. And, you have to pre-plan it. You can't just say, tomorrow I'm going to take a week off for paid family leave. You have to put in a request with your job, and it has to be scheduled in there because, they do have to cover the work that you do miss. But with proper notice, you have, protection to take the time for your family. Also, if there's a death in your family, and, depending on whatever our family situations and dynamics are, sometimes we do need more. Sometimes it impacts some people more, or you need to help now your family establish after the loss of, like, a certain member. um, Also, if you have to take care of a family member that's, terminally ill, these are reasons that many, for years and generations, families have had to try to work around and, balance going to work and making sure you don't get your boss mad, but also taking care of your family because their life depends on it. So paid family leave has really been such a help to families of all sorts and all over the state, that have these moments in their life that they need to help their family. And I think that's something that nobody, and it's obvious nobody disagreed on. It's past, it's here, that family comes first, and we need to be able to keep that balance and security with our living and our jobs, but keeping our families, protected. So I
It's
think it
great.
was a 30-day requirement, at least, if I remember correctly. 30 days, to fill out the form that the state has presented to your employer. They got to get it approved within, but it usually always goes through. And the only other requirement is job. So if you're a part-time worker, you can't take paid family leave because technically you do have the other part-time.
Well,
But
that's interesting.
yeah, it's for full-time workers. I don't think there's a wage uh, chart as to how much you need to make before you're allowed to take the time off. But yeah.
I wonder, when you said that you have to be working full time, I'm thinking about adjunct professors. We have some adjunct professors that are working, 2 or 3 or 4 jobs in different colleges, try to string enough money together to, support their families. But because of the way the law is written, as you just described it, it sounds like they might not be eligible for something like that
No, I think they might.
because they're working part time for each college,
Hmm.
even though they're working for, 3 or 4 jobs, whatever, to make a full time
Then
salary.
maybe, yeah, maybe not, because I believe you do need to have your one employer,
Mhm.
to do this. And if you're with multiple um, employers, and yeah, I'm not gonna say that I know the answer right now.
I-
So
No, it just seems like it might be one of the problem areas that, especially nowadays.
It
And
might
then
be,
the
but that also goes into a conversation that, I know has been a topic this last year before COVID came about freelance workers and,
yeah,
gig workers, making sure that they have the protection. So I think this is a conversation that evolved from the paid family leave to now, like, benefits, health coverage for Uber drivers, for,
mhm,
the handyman. I know there's an app called Handy where you can get somebody to help fix your stove or something.
yeah,
And these are real conversations that need to be had because these are our people that need protection, that need healthcare, that need benefits. And regardless of whether you're in office 8 hours a day or you're driving an Uber or making deliveries here 8, 10 hours a day, you should be able to get the protection needed. So
yeah.
that discussion is happening currently. And I know it started, last year, but certainly something that the legislature is trying to figure out how to make this work,
Right.
and we'll see how much longer it takes to get it right.
Yeah, it seems like a complicated issue that requires a lot of thought. So I'm glad you folks are investing the time in that.
Hmm.
Now, for the Paid Family Leave Act, do you have to be a U.S. citizen or can anybody qualify?
um no, I don't think you need to be a U.S. citizen.
Okay. Is there a risk that if you're not a U.S. citizen or if you're an illegal immigrant, that you might be arrested if you try to apply for the program?
Maybe if you're completely undocumented, because
Uh,
there are some people that don't have any documentation, but if you have green card, residency, uh you should be fine
okay,
in being able
great,
to get this.
great. Okay. I could spend a lot more time talking with you. It sounds like you know a lot more than you're saying because we just don't have enough time to talk about everything that's important. So let me just ask a couple more questions and I'll let you go. I know you're very busy. One is, I understand you are up for re-election. And so the obvious question is, why should we re-elect you?
Well, re-elect me now into the assembly because I still am dedicated to this neighborhood, this district. This is my home. This is the home of my family when they came from, their respective countries, Cuba and Colombia. And I still very much am dedicated to making sure that my duties, as a sitting assembly member, and community representative will never be gone. I've been a public servant for 10 years. I've been an elected official for 2 years. So my need, my want to check in and make sure that, this community is protected will never leave. But next year there is an opportunity to elect a new borough president, and I will be pursuing that as well because I believe that this borough is seeking new leadership, and seeking a fresh start, a modern start, and to really be supported by somebody that has given their all to this borough. I've given my heart, my everything to this borough, and now in this position that the borough is in a recovery mode or entering recovery mode after COVID. As much as I've cared for my district here, I will be there 110% for the borough.
It does seem as though we are experiencing a changing of the guard in New York politics, both at the local and the state level. So it looks like you're part of that new guard. And I certainly wish you great success in your future activities.
Thank you.
And so
Thank
thank
you
you for
so much.
joining us, and thank you for sharing your knowledge with us. This has been very helpful. Um, hopefully I'll see you again sometime in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. This was a really good conversation. And I'm happy to come back on again so we can continue.
Great. All right, thank you. Take care.
Take care. Thank you.